Just a word of introduction about our series for this Lenten season. Over these 5 weeks, I've called Eyewitness to Holy Week. And what it presents each week is a monologue. Remember when Lenten midweek services had someone from the church dressed in a bathrobe? And I think I was Nicodemus one year. I don't remember. But these are a little bit different. I think you'll find them very intriguing. They are first-person monologues about people who participated in Holy Week, who were a part of the story of Holy Week from Palm Sunday to Maundy Thursday to Good Friday to the burial of Christ and to the events of Easter morning. Each of these is maybe about 15 minutes, and then we'll have time just for a little bit of conversation. I expect that maybe we'll be through by 7 o'clock or a little after that. Tom Spadero, thank you for video recording. This will be on our new YouTube page, FLCS Live, which doesn't require signing up as one would have to do for Facebook, but just go right to YouTube and you'll be able to see these, and they'll remain archived. And subscribe. But we are over 50. But the more people that subscribe, the more people will be able to view the product that's there. So, as you can see here, there are a number of episodes.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke only briefly mentioned me in their Gospels. But John gave me a little more recognition. He talked about how I introduced Nathanael to Jesus and how we came to be followers of Jesus. He wrote about my role in the feeding of the 5,000, but he also recognized that I tried to introduce a group of Greeks to Jesus. That attempt resulting in an important speech by Jesus about his impending death. And he also recorded a few words that I said on the night before Jesus died. Oh, okay, yes. So, there were 2 men in the Bible named Philip. One was a man who taught the Ethiopian eunuch and lived in Caesarea. The book of Acts talks about him. That's not me. I'm Philip, the apostle.
The gospel writers tell us that Jesus began his final hours by celebrating Passover dinner with his 12 closest friends, who probably didn't realize how little time they had left with him. But Jesus chose to fill that limited time with the pinnacle of his teachings.
We were in the upper room. Jesus had just finished telling Peter that he would soon deny Jesus 3 times. Jesus tried to console all of us by telling us that he was going away to be with the Father and that he would be preparing a place for us, and that he would come back and take each one of us to be with him. And we would have been more consoled if we understood what he was talking about. Thomas blurts out, "Lord, we don't know where you're going. And how could we know the way?" Jesus replied, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. If you had known me, you should have known my Father too." Now, rather than catching the insinuation that we had really never known Jesus, I triggered one of the most famous passages in the Bible. By opening my mouth, I said, "Lord, show us the Father. It's enough for us." Jesus looked at me with a sad smile and the softest voice. He said, "Have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me? Philip, whoever has seen me has seen the Father." I should have been embarrassed, but I was astounded. I got it. I finally got it. The Father was God. Wait, Jesus was God? They were the same? I got it. Well, I got a glimpse of the truth. And for the next 20 minutes, Jesus opened the floodgates of truth. Jesus and the Father and the Spirit were all in each other, and we had the ability to be in them too. Jesus was going away, but we were going to receive the Spirit and peace. Our heads exploded. In a few sentences, mysteries hidden for eons were revealed to us. How could we even begin to comprehend what Jesus was saying? And that dilemma was solved moments later. Jesus rose up from the table and told us to leave with him. And after we left the room and started down the hill to the Kidron Valley, Jesus stopped. He leaned down, picked up a branch from a grapevine by the path, and he told us a story. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine keeper. Every branch in me that doesn't bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit gets pruned so that it bears more fruit. You are clean through the words that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. A branch can't bear fruit by itself. It has to be attached to the vine. You can't bear fruit unless you abide in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. The one that abides in me and I in him, that's the one who bears much fruit. Without me, you can do nothing. Jesus kept talking, but ended the example with, and by this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As a Father has loved me, so have I loved you. We walked on to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus continued to pour out his parting words of wisdom. Each sentence was worth an entire lifetime of study. But I could not get my mind off of the story of the vine and the branches. For the next 2,000 years, people would be interpreting it the best they could. Let me tell you how I thought of it that night. In Israel, during early September, you become accustomed to the sight of vineyards during the harvest season. You see these thick brown vines growing up about 3 or 4 feet from the ground. And each vine ends in a knurl from which numerous branches grow along the different directions of the trellises. From the branches grow a lot of large leaves that vary from dark green to yellow, bright red even, depending on the exact time of the season. In fact, most of what you see is an abundance of leaves. Hidden among these leaves, clusters of dark purple or light green grapes hanging from the branches. The branches not only bear fruit, but they bear leaves. And having the proper amount of leaves is critical to making the most and best fruit. The point of pruning and trimming is to end up with the right amount of branch that produces the right mixture of leaves to yield the right amount of fruit. The vine keepers are never finished. Their lives are a continuum of planting and growing and pruning and harvesting. Planting, growing, pruning, and harvesting. And that night, I knew the story was all about God and his desires. God the Father is the vine keeper, but he's also the creator and owner of the vineyard. So it is only his desires that matter, and his primary desire is to be glorified. This premise is the basis for understanding the parable. The teaching is very clear that God is glorified when the branches bear much fruit and thereby prove themselves to be disciples. Generally, we apostles knew that we glorified God by living a life of continual praise and worship and by proclaiming and expanding his kingdom. This is exactly what Jesus did on earth. So at the end of his life, he was able to tell the Father, I have brought you glory on earth by completing the work you gave me to do. The vine keeper is responsible for the vine being the most fruitful by preparing the soil and the vines. He cuts off and burns branches that don't bear fruit. A branch doesn't bear fruit if it becomes disconnected from the vine, or if it's capable of bearing fruit, but chooses to be totally unproductive or produce only leaves. God trims and prunes fruitful branches from excess branch growth, twigs, and leaves, so they become more fruitful. Pruning and trimming process will likely feel unpleasant and may possibly vary in the form of discipline that God provides because he loves me. In my daily life, pruning and trimming probably require the elimination of activities, emotions, or thoughts which make me ineffective and unproductive. Jesus said that he is the true vine. However, it's critical to remember that just before telling the parable, Jesus had said that he, the Father, and the Holy Spirit are all in each other. So, abiding in Jesus is equivalent to abiding in God. The vine knows that it cannot be fruitful unless the branches are connected to it, since it is the source of all important nutrients needed for life. Jesus had often talked about being the source of life, and that the connection came through belief in him. Now, followers of Jesus are the branches, and the purpose of each branch is to produce much fruit. In order to do that, the branch will have to optimize its input of nutrients from the vine and optimize its output by properly allocating its resources between the two activities of making fruit and making leaves. During this teaching, Jesus taught us that a healthy branch trusts God, knows Jesus and the Father, has faith in Jesus, obeys Jesus, has the Holy Spirit, loves Jesus, and is loved by Jesus and the Father. Have peace, love each other, do not belong to the world, and testify about Jesus to others. If I am an unfruitful branch, God will either work in my life to help me become fruitful, or he will allow me to be cut off from the vine and destroyed. If I'm a fruitful branch, God will prune me and make me more fruitful. Painful at first. These actions are necessary for my own benefit and for God's glory. Abide. It means that the branches are connected in such a close way that they live inside the vine and the vine lives inside them. Peter calls it participating in the divine nature. Paul phrases it as living by the Spirit and keeping in step with the Spirit. Jesus puts it simply, if anyone loves me, he will obey my teachings. My Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. My intimacy with Christ, my closeness to him, as with all other relationships with God, is grace-driven. His grace is not only the enabler of my salvation, but is the enabler for going deeper in the attachment to him and for bearing fruit. It is his great love for me that disciplines me to remove my shortcomings so that I can respond to his invitation to have a more intimate relationship and to be further transformed into a Christ-like person who can demonstrate God's love to the world. The path to this deeper intimacy is through a lifestyle of personal abandonment and absolute trust. It is my option to abide in Jesus, but Jesus commands me to do so. Why? Because I cannot bear fruit unless I abide in him. By this he means that although I may produce some works, I can't produce works or fruit of value. No fruit. Nada. None. Zip. Zero. I may think I'm making fruit, but I am not unless I am abiding in him, I'm entirely useless and stand in danger of being destroyed. We apostles had already heard the story from Jesus about people who thought they were being fruitful, but were going to be destroyed because in reality, they weren't being fruitful. It's the secret sauce. Abiding is the secret sauce to making all good deeds fruitful. It's through abiding that I'm transformed from a worker who loves to a lover who works. If abiding in Jesus is so important, how could I start to do a better job of that? Well, here are some things I thought of. Regularly praying and reading scriptures, forgiving anyone that I have not yet forgiven, and setting my heart and mind on heavenly things. According to the parable, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am abiding in Jesus if I'm bearing much fruit. That is one reason why it's critical to be clear about the definition of fruit. If I'm mistaken about the definition of fruit, I may very likely expend many resources producing something that isn't fruit. Having a proper understanding of what fruit is crucial to intentionally living a fruitful life. According to the parable, fruit can be described as those things that cause God to be glorified. In the context of this parable, fruit seems primarily to mean the making of disciples by proclaiming and expanding of God's kingdom. As we apostles file, disciples are made through both sharing the gospel and doing good works that bring glory to God. You may have noticed that I have talked about leaves several times in this story, but Jesus didn't mention them in the parable. I mentioned them because they are a critical aspect of how I apply this parable to my own life. We did not understand the science of growing grapes, but we knew the practicalities of doing so. We knew you needed enough leaves on the branch to make good grapes, but not so many leaves that the grapes had too little nourishment. Now, in my own life, the leaves stand for activities that consume my time and energy, but do not produce fruit for God. If I have too many outside activities, I can't maximize the fruit I produce. Now, in my time, our outside activities were fairly limited because we were so poor. You're not so fortunate. You have an unlimited amount of diversions at your fingertips. I mean, television, movies, sports, hobbies, computers, internet, a long list of other activities. Fatigue, overscheduling, sleep, drugs, alcohol. There's no doubt that you have to be dedicated to God, to allocate your resources between making fruit or making leaves. Jesus said, "This is my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." So, in your life, which will it be? Fruit or leaves?
Well, are we convicted yet? So, I had a choice. We could have had Judas up here tonight, but we've all done the Judas thing. But this apostle who nobody knows, he had a lot to say tonight. There was a lot of material there. But were it not for John's gospel, and we're in the middle of John's gospel right now on Sundays, and we'll be further in the middle of John's gospel in the Easter season. In fact, dealing with some of these very concepts. Jesus, on the night of his betrayal, Jesus who had a lot to say about discipleship, about the Trinity, I and the Father, the Spirit, those who would follow, praying for you and me and all who would follow in the times that would come, and of course, journeying to the cross. John's gospel, to me anyway, is in some ways a corrective. It's like the writer of the fourth gospel came along maybe 10, 20 years at least after Luke, Matthew, and said, there are some people who got left out. And I want to tell you about them. Nicodemus. There's no Nicodemus in the other three Gospels. Not at night, hearing what we call John 3:16, and not walking up to Pontius Pilate with Joseph of Arimathea to claim the dead body of Jesus. The woman at the well, only in John. You'll hear about her this coming Sunday. The wedding at Cana, only in the fourth gospel. The man born blind, although there were plenty of people born blind and who were blind in the midst of Jesus' ministries, this particular person. And then maybe the most famous of them, Lazarus, who we're told is the brother of Martha and Mary, who dies, it seems, due to Jesus' delay, but who is raised. Philip has one line. You talk about a cameo. He doesn't say a word outside of John's gospel. But there are a number of the disciples, of the apostles, who are silent in Mark and then Matthew and then Luke. In fact, one of them is so silent that in the different lists of the apostles, there are different names. Bartholomew. There's no Bartholomew in John's gospel. Instead, we get Nathanael. And so some very clever scholars have said, I think Bartholomew was his middle name. But how about the fact that for 300 years, the Church of Jesus, through its outlaw period, knew that there were lists of the apostles that differed between the four Gospels. What, did we think their pencils didn't have erasers? That they couldn't have sent it off to be fixed? In fact, we know that in the 2nd century there was a movement among some to harmonize the four Gospels and make one nice, neat story. Get rid of all of those things that make us go, oh, who, what? They left it there because they had such a sense of the sacrality of the Word of God, including what Philip says on that night. So let me ask you, was there a particular part of what you heard that grabbed a hold of you and you said, hadn't thought about that? Or, hey, I'm not so sure I agree with that guy. Anything that you saw, Laura?
Just the idea of allocating to the grapes and the leaves, and the necessity for the leaves, for the grapes to grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things about traveling to the Holy Land, or frankly living here in in this part of the world where so much of their reality in Galilee is not that much different than our reality here, that what didn't make it into the text of John's Gospel, for example, a nice sort of treatment of how it is that we grow grapes and make wine. But they would have known this. They would have known this. It was a part of their reality. And the idea, not too much, not too little. Really helpful, I think. It tells us more about Philip than the gospel tells us. What about show us the Father and we'll be satisfied? Because that is a quote from John's gospel. Show us the Father. And Jesus says, I've been with you all this time, Philip. A little bit like what we heard last Sunday from Nicodemus. You are a teacher of Israel and you don't understand? Apparently not. Yeah. So what else? Anything else that grabbed a hold of you in this presentation? This apostle? Yes, Nicolette.
When he's talking about the leaves and the grapes, I have to listen real carefully to understand what he's saying. But to me, it seems like what he's saying about the leaves are the things that kind of get us ready to make the fruit. And if you have too many leaves or too few, you can't do the big fruit. So you've got to decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Do right. I mean, it's all in the pruning.
Yeah. I was blessed to do my seminary internship in a farm community. What would be the last place you would want to send a kid from Queens to? And believe me, I didn't write down, I would like a rural seminary internship call. No, I just wanted to get done a year early. And that was the last available internship on the last possible day that you could be assigned. So it was likely when I got up that morning that I was going to have to go home and tell Mrs. Hurst that what I'd been promising her ever since we moved from Queens was not going to happen. Because I reasoned, we're already here. She may not talk to me for the next year, but, we're already here. Thankfully for me, an associate pastor up in this farm village got fired. And so someone called the seminary and said, do you have anybody left? It's a little like getting the call here. Who's left? You've tried everybody else. Well, do you have anybody left? Yeah, we got this one guy. So I go up to this farm community, and I learned so much about the limitations of the farmer, the spirituality of the farmer. They understand that the things that you do, step 1, 2, and 500, are crucially important. And they are going to make the difference in terms of what you end up with at harvest. That's part of what I heard from this, that leaves and fruit are part of a process, part of a discipling process, part of walking in ways that we might not even recognize are going to lead to a harvest of grace and peace and joy. To most of us, it just looks like another leaf to turn the page on and move to the next thing. But there's nothing wasteful. Everything is important. Every step along the way could be a deal maker or a deal breaker in the hands of a faithful farmer or vintner, I think. Yes, please, Yvonne.
My favorite part was when Phil was actually talking to Jesus, and he finally gets it, and he's looking at the Father.
Yeah.
And you could just see that transformation.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite.
Yeah. It really was. I got it, he says. And he admits it. I don't got it all, but I got it. It hit home. Yeah. So maybe the thing to leave off with tonight, Philip he's really smart. And he really understands. This, to me, feels like someone who has experienced Pentecost. And who is now stepping out into the world. As he said at the beginning of this monologue, there are two Philips in the Scriptures. I almost said in the Gospels. But the other Philip is in the book of Acts. He is the deacon, not the apostle Philip, but deacon Philip, one of the 7 who are set apart to run the food pantry. And the next thing you know, they're out in the street getting in trouble, which is what deacons do. At least that's been my experience, including being one. But this Philip, on that night, we know that in all probability, he followed the other 10. Because there were 11 left, right? 1 went for the payday that was turning in his rabbi, his teacher, his friend. And the other 11, including Philip, they run. One of them to deny in the courtyard. and the rest of them to disappear. They're not in the story. Not at all. The women are present, both, I think, because of their raw courage and the fact that nobody really cared. Because they were, after all, just women. What could they do? Yeah. Philip had to have had the experience of failing. And if I have one critique of this monologue, it is the kind of declarative, you're either in or you're out. You're either producing fruit that endures or into the fire. It sounds like John the Baptist to me a little bit. When really what I think the walk of faith is that we are both fruitful and leafy, weedy, overburdened with that which needs pruning and care. And at our worst moments, we may not look like, why does Jesus even keep them around? And at other times, we rise to the occasion. It's so easy to segment people. Are you one of the in people or one of the out people? Are you the Philip who says, I got it? Or are you just Simon the Zealot sitting in the back going, I don't know what he's talking about right now? And that's the walk of faith. We all come to Holy Week, I think, as a mixture of the hero who we would wish to be, the scoundrel who we so often turn out to be, and maybe somewhere in between, just those who are frightened and who aren't sure what God is up to, and certainly aren't certain of what Jesus is up to on that week that we call holy. So something to think about as we think about and pray about and fret about what we call discipleship, what we call apostleship, what we call in our baptismal liturgy, shining bright so that others will see the good and give glory to our Father in heaven. Yes, Nicolette, please.
One of the things he kept saying over and over, though, to be a disciple is believing in Jesus and never, ever stopping, no matter what. You know, and that the pruning will hurt and all that. So you don't give up during those times. You don't stop believing. You should keep believing maybe even more and double down on it.
Yeah, next time you're thinking of giving up because things aren't going so well, think about Abraham at 100. Talk about keep on keeping on. And perhaps just to close, each and every one of us in our own way, I believe, comes to Holy Week with an understanding, I hope, that we are not the heroes that we might think ourselves to be, or pray that we would become. The story of the disciples, I believe, needs to include their failure. I don't know if you ever saw Jason and the Argonauts. It's a great, great movie. Ray Harryhausen, all of those animated creatures, and the sword fight with the skeletons and all of that. Well, sure, they got to the Golden Fleece. They were heroes. There's a boatload of heroes. Jesus did not have a boatload of heroes. At least Mark seems to think what Jesus had was a boatload of fools. Which is instructive for us. Even the fool in us, the person riddled with mistakes, wrong understandings, fears, regrets, anxieties, all of that was what they brought to the day of Pentecost, and is really the proof that the miracle that is the gospel can even transform folks like us and like them. So I hope that tonight was instructive. Next week, we will have a twofer where you will meet two people who figure prominently in the Holy Week story. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks. And good night. And let me return this microphone that looks suspiciously